Let's kick it off with none other than the main event, the grand finale this weekend, Caleb Plant, Armando Resendiz. Okay, let me just state this very out of the gate. Armando Resendiz, hats off to you. You know, when we talk about boxing, there is the opportunity to let the world learn your name on a stage quite frequently. And when you go in there, at the end of the day, for boxing, it comes down to mano y mano, one man versus another man. And Armando Resendiz was the massive underdog heading into this fight. Caleb Plant was the clear-cut favorite in this fight, and not only was he the clear-cut favorite to win the fight, he already had his next fight lined up. But the beautiful thing about boxing is that one man can alter the entire plan and trajectory of a sport and those plans. And Armando Resendiz showed up that night, and he took care of business. He took those plans that Caleb Plant and Jermall Charlo had and tossed them right up on out of there. He said, no, you guys might not know my name. I'm going to be making my debut at 168 this weekend. And on top of that, I'm only 26 years old. Nobody in the world thinks that I'm going to win this fight, myself included. And yet, I'm going to shock the world. Armando Resendiz, welcome to the worldwide recognition list. You are now well known around the world right now, and you have made a statement in boxing. And let me go even a step further. We are only now 5 months in the books, but at this point in time, you are the best upset of the year. You have the upset of the year in your hands right now. So hats off to you, Armando Resendiz. He went out there against Caleb Plant, who started off fine, but as the fight progressed, Resendiz started to allow his pressure, constant output to build up on Caleb Plant to where that second half of the fight was almost entirely given over to Armando Resendiz. And he earned himself the upset of the year in that fight. I could go on about Caleb Plant, and I will actually discuss him very shortly. But right now it's time to praise the work in which Armando Resendiz did because he shocked the world on Saturday night. Can I say one more thing before I go any further, though? Let me roll up my sleeve real quickly for this segment. David Sutherland, you need to be investigated. The scorecards for Armando Resendiz versus Caleb Plant read this: 116, 112, 113, 115, 116, 112. Your scorecard was the one that had Caleb Plant winning 113 to 115. You need to be investigated, David Sutherland, because at the end of the day, what you try doing is what happens far too often in boxing, and that is try to rob somebody of a much-deserved victory. Thank goodness we had two good judges on the table there judging this fight. You, David Sutherland, need to seriously be investigated. And you might ask, why? Well, David Sutherland somehow gave Caleb Plant the victory. Right out the gate, that is an outlandish statement to make. But can I give you guys the facts? David Sutherland said this: the final 3 rounds for Caleb Plant were won by Caleb Plant for him. And to give you guys the factual context here, Resendiz outlanded Caleb Plant 83 to 41 over that time span. And yet David Sutherland thought Caleb Plant deserved those rounds. Not just one of them, all 3 of them. That is an outlandish statement to make. And you are the problem with boxing. We got to get rid of guys like David Sutherland. In fact, let me go even a step further. I don't ever want to call for a man's job to be taken away, but this man needs to be investigated. This man needs to be checked, maybe drug tested, or maybe, let's even go a step further, maybe it's time to terminate him and put him on suspension. Because guess what? A lot of other times, if a fighter screws around and messes something up, or other guys make mistakes in the world of sports, there is punishment. David Sutherland, on the other hand, he just gets to walk right on back into his little world and gets to go live life. While you attempted to screw over a guy of having a career, life-changing, defining win, he should be ashamed of himself. Absolutely ridiculous that he thought that was even remotely a possible fight for Caleb Plant to win that fight. So yes, David Sutherland, I have a problem with that. You need to address the world as to why you thought that was the case. And guess what? It's going to be a ridiculous statement because there is no exception. There is nobody that's going to look at you seriously and say that Caleb Plant won those final 3 rounds. You need to be investigated. And guess what? I don't even really want to see you judging a fight because when I look at this, I see a guy that only wants to make mega fights happen and be buddy up with the promotion companies and not let the guys that actually win a fight win their fights. So you are a disgrace to boxing, and we want no part of you, David Sutherland. Let's get back into the actual fight there, because thankfully we had 2 judges that gave the fight a lot more of a better score in there, 116 to 112. For Resendiz, congratulations, as I said. Look, hats off to you. You deserved it, and now you get to set yourself up for a big fight next. You now are the interim world champion. at for the WBA at super middleweight. You have options on the table. You could possibly even go a step further and really steal Caleb Plant's shine and take the Charlo fight. Or a guy I'm going to talk about very shortly, in Beck, who just had an incredible performance against DFG this past weekend on Friday. You could possibly make a fight against him. Both those fights make a lot of sense. But regardless of what the situation is, Armando Resendiz is now known around the world for the upset of the year at this point in time, and he has a bright, bright future ahead of himself. As for Caleb Plant, I like Caleb Plant. I really, really like Caleb Plant, and I don't want to bash the guy. But can I be honest about the situation now? In the ring on Saturday night, Caleb Plant looked a little old to me. That did not look like the prime Caleb Plant. You could say they maybe underestimated his opponent, and he said he did not, but let's be honest, Armando Resendiz had no business even really being in the ring to begin with when we looked at the fight being made. Nobody thought he had a chance at winning that fight, and I didn't think so either. I was very wrong on that, I'll admit that. But he looked very, very old in that ring. And I'm not going to write Caleb Plant off. He had a good performance against Trevor McCumbee. He's still a good fighter. My question, though, is this. Where is he at this point in time? And I don't know that answer. And it also does make 168 a little bit interesting because I feel like the tide's really turned over the past week. Between the Jaime Munguia situation, Caleb Plant now falling out. Obviously, Canelo is nearing his retirement in those situations. 168 now has up-and-coming new blood. From Beck, DFG, obviously, I think he's going to be back as well. Obviously, Armando Resendiz, and so on and so forth. But you just have to wonder for Caleb Plant, where do you go from here? You know, in my honest opinion, the Charlo fight is probably not off the books entirely. Does it make a lot of sense? And is he ready for that fight? I don't think so. But Charlo is not in a position where he's going to fight for world title, nor is he the interim world champion or anything along those lines. So there's not necessarily a reason that they can't make Charlo's fight happen. That could still be on the table. You could also make a fight against Demetrius Andrade. That could also be a fight on the table. Or you do the rematch. And if you're Caleb Plant, this is why it comes down to right now, this moment in time, Caleb Plant needs to evaluate what is on the table for myself. And you have a couple options. If you want to work your way back up and prove that you are still that guy or at least a top level contender, I would take the rematch. It's going to be enough. You're going to earn a decent amount of money now, but the rematch is your get back. Only sport in the world where you can get your get back one-on-one. Caleb Plant has the opportunity to do just that. On the other side of the story, you could also decide and say, you know what? It's time to start cashing out. I've got my money. I've got my success. I've got these things. Let's go cash out these final fights. And if you're going to go that route, obviously the Charlo fight makes the most sense there. And so you could go down that path. But this is why it's going to be critical. Caleb Plant can take the next couple of months and figure out what's next for him. Either way around it, he can have himself set up for a nice little payday, but he has to decide what route he wants to go down. This leads me to one other point I want to make before I move on to the co-main event with Charlo. A massive debate has been growing quite rapidly in boxing over the duration of the past, let's call it 16 months. And that question is a question which is this. Should mega fights just go right into happening as opposed to having tune-up or build-up fights? What do I mean by that? We go back to December 22nd, 2023, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, same exact card. Both guys were lined up to fight on March 9th, 2024. And at that point in time, we had both guys going back-to-back fighting. Deontay Wilder had one of the most abysmal performances that we've seen in boxing when he fought Joseph Parker. He loses that opportunity. Now Anthony Joshua goes out and gets the job done. But now that fight no longer makes any sense. So that fight's now off the table. We fast forward to now what happened just about 4 weeks ago. And at that situation, we go to Times Square. Devin Haney, although he looked abysmal in his performance, still got the job done and won the fight. And then Ryan Garcia comes up and, well, craps the bed, let's be honest, against Rolly Romero. And at that point in time, that fight now is off the table. Let's fast forward now to what happened Saturday night. Jermall Charlo and Caleb Plant were supposed to fight each other in a mega fight. Charlo goes up first. He takes care of business against Thomas LaManna. And then Caleb Plant comes out. Obvious favorite. Everybody knows it's going to be a quick walkthrough. Should be a quick KO. Get him out of there. And now Caleb Plant is sitting in the position where he's now up for upset of the year. Interesting situation to be placed in. And it appears now that while this fight is still possible to be made, it no longer has the hype it once had. It no longer has the promise, the excitement behind it that it once did have, as though, 48 hours ago. So I asked the question again, should we just go right into these fights, or are the tune-up fights right? I'm going to give both sides of the story, then I'm going to give my thoughts on this. One side of the story is this. At the end of the day, would we have wanted to see the Caleb Plant that showed up on Saturday night against Jermall Charlo? That's an important question to ask, because Caleb Plant did not look good at all. Would that fight have even been good? I don't know. Same thing with the other fights involved. Would the Ryan Garcia that we saw in that fight against Rolly Romero and the Devin Haney that we saw too ever have been a good fight? Probably not. Same thing with Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua showed out that night against Otto Wallin. Deontay Wilder was abysmal. What would have happened to Deontay Wilder in that ring if they would have fought that night? I don't know. So, on one side of the story, I think the tune-up fights could be critical, and it eliminates the potential for a bad, massive fight. Let's go to the other side of the story, though. These are big fights. Boxers are in boxing to make big money. And I understand that Charlo was the reason this fight did not happen right out the gate, because Charlo wanted a tune-up fight. And rightfully so, let's be honest. He was out for a long time. But my opinion is this. If you want to make the fight happen, go in there and make the fight happen. Let's stop doing this little build-up fight, put two guys in the same card back to back, and then hope it all works out. Boxing is one of the most unique sports in the world. And actually, combat sports as a whole is the only sports in the world where the entire trajectory of a fight can be flipped in a moment. 1 second is all it takes to have a knockout. 1 second, anything can change. Plans can get busted and changed in a moment. Only in combat sports can that occur. So you're playing with fire. You got quite the risk you got going on right at the moment if you're going to try to put yourself in a situation that says, you know what? Let's hope both these guys make it out. This is boxing. Anything can happen, and we just saw it happen on Saturday night once again. So if you really want these big grudge matches to be happening and boxing fights to get made, go right into them and make it happen. However, if you want the best fights to be made, then guess what? Doing the way we've been having it happen is fine. Because there's a difference between biggest and best fights. If you want the biggest fights to happen, go right into them and make them happen. That's the way to make them biggest. If you want to make them the best fight possible, then doing the tune-up route is probably okay for you. And I say this because, like I said, it eliminates what would have been likely horrible performances from guys. You could say that maybe they would have risen to the occasion if it was a bigger fight, but let's be honest, guys just did not look good in those fights. So if I were to make this statement, I'd say this. If you want the best fights to be made, keep doing this route, if necessary. If you need a tune-up fight for a situation like Charlo, where he's just out of the equation for a long time, let's go and just wait a little bit and make that tune-up fight happen. But if you want to make money and you want the biggest fights possible, then guess what? Book those fights right out the gate and stop waiting around. That's the end of the story. That's my opinion on it. I think it depends on what both aspects want in the situation. And at that point in time, you can make the affirmative decision on how you want to proceed. The co-main event on Saturday night, Jermall Charlo versus Thomas LaManna, super middleweight performance. Charlo looked good. You know, Charlo's been out of the ring for quite some time. We talked about this. And if anybody was going to be upset, I thought it would have been Charlo that would have struggled, simply because of the ring rust. I don't know about you, but Jermall Charlo looked good. He wasn't prime Charlo, no. But he looked good. For a man that's been out of the ring and gone through what he's gone through outside of that ring, Jermall Charlo looked really, really good. I was thoroughly impressed. The jab that he has, the way that he hunts down his prey inside that ring is phenomenal. His patience is very underrated as well. The way he just calmly waited and stalked out Thomas LaManna and dropped him and dropped him and dropped multiple times up until the doctor had to stop the fight. And I'll say this about this doctor stoppage real quickly. When we look back at the situation, you could tell that both guys did not want the stoppage right there. Charlo wanted the exclamation point, and Thomas LaManna wanted to go out on a shield. The doctor stops it. It is what it is. It still was in a phenomenal performance from Charlo. I was very, very high on the way he performed. I think he looked great. He did his job. He took care of business, and he dominated that fight against Thomas LaManna. Who could possibly be next for Charlo? With Caleb Plant's fight, obviously there's an opportunity to go and make that fight still happen. I don't think that's out of the question yet. But other guys, Demetrius Andrade, that could be a fight you go out there and make. David Morrell could be a fight you make. You know, there's a lot of fights on the table right now for Charlo. I think his best decision right now is to stay active. Whatever it takes to stay active and get back in the ring within 6 months is what he needs to go out there and do. He's best when he's active. And can I just say one more thing? That's what I really want to kind of finish up on the co-main event portion. But what I really want to make a statement on real quickly is this. Things happen in life. And we can't go back and obviously, if Charlo could make a decision and not go through things he had to go through, obviously he would choose that route. But all I want to say is this, is man, when I look at the way that Charlo performed on Saturday after the long layoff in which he had, it just makes you wonder, what would Jermall Charlo have been able to accomplish had everything gone according to plan from up here and in his life outside of the ring? Jermall Charlo would have been spectacular. He was a phenomenal talent. He is a phenomenal talent. I think he's still going to go out there and accomplish great things. But it just makes you wonder. His God-given ability is remarkable. He has a patience, a demeanor, the ability to stalk out his prey, and then that jab. That jab might be the best jab in all boxing. It probably is, to be honest with you. He is so God-given with so much talent to fight in that ring. And it just makes you excited for what could happen if he stays locked in over the next few years. Let's head over to what I consider was going to be one of the best fights of the weekend. I ended up saying on Friday that Yoenli Hernandez, he was going to be able to go out against Kyrone Davis. That was possibly going to be the fight of the weekend. But I said, obviously, my number one fight of the weekend is DFG versus Beck. And that ended up being the fight of the weekend. But let's get right back to it. Yo-Yo Hernandez versus Kyrone Shut It Down Davis. Somebody made a statement in that fight. Kyrone Shut It Down Davis is a good fighter. And I think what he's going to end up finding in his role going forward is he's going to be a very good gatekeeper. Not a guy that's going to become a world champion, but a guy that's going to be a great gatekeeper and make a lot of money doing so. We saw what he did with Elijah Garcia. Big upset there. And then we see what he did against Yo-Yo. And Kyrone Shut It Down Davis, while he was good, he's a good fighter. In that performance, he was outclassed. And Yo-Yo put on an absolute masterpiece in that performance. I mean, we look at what Hernandez did in that night. What I will say is this. Unanimous decision, 189 across the board, all three in favor of Yo-Yo. He dropped Kyrone Shut It Down Davis in the second round. It was utter domination from start to finish. Kyrone Shut It Down Davis had no answer for him at any point. Yo-Yo completely broke him in that fight. And obviously, he didn't get the KO. And Kyrone Davis went longer than any other fighter has before. And I think that's a big testament to his endurance, his mentality, and his strength in the ring for Kyrone Shut It Down Davis. But at the same time, we saw that there is levels to this thing. And what I can preview right now for you is this. We got a future world champion in Yoenli Hernandez. It's only a matter of time until this man is going to be a world champion. And you look at the table, who could he possibly go after? Janabek is an enticing fight. He does not necessarily want to go fight Erislandy Lara, but Lara is certainly on the table for a fight for him. And I believe that it could be a rough ending to a career for Lara if they were to go in that ring and fight each other. Yoenli Hernandez is vicious. That man goes out there and wants to take your head off. He was vicious. The way, and let me say this too, he was what really sold me. I was already sold. I was already going off on how good of a performance he was having on X in the midst of that fight. Let's go to the 12th round. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that he had won that fight. That fight was in the books. He had it. He could just cruise to that 12th round. He didn't have to do anything. That man is staring down Kyrone Shut It Down Davis, stomping on the ground, calling him to come fight, and then laying the hammer on him every time he engaged. It was a masterful performance from Yo-Yo. He went out there and wanted to make a statement. And in my opinion, he put the entire middleweight division on notice. He showed that, listen, I am the future of the middleweight division. I will be a world champion, and it's only a matter of time until I've got that belt around my waist. He had a masterful performance. And so what's next for him? As I said, he needs a world title shot. No other fight should be made except for a world title shot for Yoenli Hernandez. For Kyrone Shut It Down Davis, as I said, I feel like he's going to now emerge as a good gatekeeper in boxing. In terms of who's going to be next for him, I don't exactly know. It's going to be a gatekeeper situation. But an interesting note here is that he had an opportunity for a title eliminator against Ntwasa Olini. And that could have been a much, much, much easier fight for himself that he ended up turning down, which was a little bit shocking. But obviously you have to factor in the money aspect. If he would have went that route, he could have been in a much better situation moving forward. But I can't always blame him. He went and took the big fight, and it was a good performance for him, for Yoenli Hernandez against him. You just can't do much about that. He was outclassed. I don't think Kyrone Shut It Down Davis was bad in the sense that he just didn't go out there and try. I think it's just that Yo-Yo was 10 times better than him. And when you're outmatched and outclassed like that, there's not much you can do. Another fight on that card I want to talk about, a couple more real quickly. Isaac Lucero, he put off the win against Omar Valenzuela, TKO in the second round. Absolute statement, has now got himself positioned inside the top 10. I think it was number 7 now in the WBA. He made a statement on Saturday. He's a guy to keep your eye on. Another guy at super welterweight to keep your eye on. Then Curmel Moton. Let me say this. First of all, he wins 80-72 across all 3 on the scorecard for Moton. Dominant performance. What's going to be next for him? Continue to build your way up. But let me add one more point to this. Curmel Moton needs to be on television. The fact that this man, who is regarded as one of the best prospects, not just in America, but the entire world, cannot get his fights put on TV is an embarrassment. There should be no issue trying to get Curmel Moton on TV. This man has earned this right to be on TV, and how is he going to grow a brand the way that it should be done for Curmel Moton without getting the recognition that you deserve on TV? It's outlandish to me that he can't be on TV, that we're having to go on an Instagram live to watch Curmel Moton Jr. Curmel Moton. I don't like that. And if we're moving forward, Floyd Mayweather needs to make sure that his guy is put on TV. End of discussion. Carl Martin versus Francisco Pedroza, super bantamweight division. Martin won 79-72, 78-73 on 2 of the scorecards. He had a great performance. Absolutely great performance in my opinion. I like what he did. And for those of you that are not familiar with him, he has positioned himself where he is going to be in a position to fight a big fight next. Here's a couple guys on the list for him. Elijah Pierce could be on the list for him, as could Sam Goodman. Both of those fights make sense for him. Listen, this is a guy that I think is going to have big fights in the future. When super bantamweight at 122 is, moved on from with Inoue and he moves to 126, he's the guy to keep your eye on as a potential world champion. All right, that's what I got for the PBC card that happened Saturday night. Let's go back down to Friday night. 2 cards went down on Friday night that I want to break down. First and foremost, Darius Fulghum versus Beck. This was going to be the fight of the weekend I predicted on Friday. And in my opinion, it was the fight of the weekend. This was a fight for the WBA super middleweight title eliminator. And both guys went out there and put on a show. Absolute war between both guys. And this is one of those rare situations in boxing where, in my opinion, both guys ended up victorious. What do I mean by that? Obviously, Darius Fulghum is no longer undefeated. Beck is the victor. He has set himself up in a better situation than DFG did. But heading into that fight, there was a lot of questions surrounding DFG as to whether or not he was ready for the big stage. He was on the show and he talked about that. A lot of people look at my record, my resume. It's not very good. And I want people to recognize that I can perform at the highest level. Well, he went out there, and in my opinion, this fight should have been a draw. I think that fight was neck and neck. I had it listed as a draw. But the scorecards of 114 to 112 by all 3 is not something out of the question. I see that. And obviously, when you factor in the knockdown in the 12th round from Beck on DFG, that makes sense. I'm not against that fight scorecards at all. The only thing I'll say is this. DFG has now earned the respect of a lot of people in the boxing world. And I'm confident to say this. His time is not over. He will be back. I just talked about it a little bit ago. The super middleweight division is an aging division right now. And a lot of turmoil and shifting is going on right now. When you talk about Canelo Alvarez, he's on his final few fights. You talk about Charlo. Obviously, he's up there in age. Who knows how long he's going to last? Caleb Plant, same exact story. And then you look at even a guy in Jaime Munguia. Obviously, we have to wait to see what happens now. He could be suspended for a while. And if it is true that the way he performed in the Bruno fights was on PEDs, then that's not a good look because he didn't look that good anyways. So there's a lot of situations to be kind of monitoring right now in this division. And so I think that DFG is going to be back in that position in the near future. And I would not even mind seeing a rematch between DFG and Beck in the future. That was one heck of a fight. But to break down the fight a little bit more specifically, as I mentioned a little bit ago, Beck scored the knockdown in the 12th round. The power from Beck really showed the difference. DFG landed more jabs. He had a great performance overall still. Like I said, I think it was a draw. But still, very, very, very close fight. What could be next, though, for Beck? I talked about with Armando Resendiz. That's the fight to make. Resendiz-Beck. Make that fight happen. I think it's a perfect situation. The 2 biggest winners of the weekend go out there and face each other in the near future. Great fight. Lester Martinez or Caleb Simpson, who's fighting this weekend. Both of those would be good fights to make. For DFG, build yourself back up. Get a win or 2 back underneath your belt. You'll be in the top 15, and the rest will be history. The co-main event, Eric Priest versus Luis Arias. 99-90 on 2 of the scorecards. 96-93 in favor of Priest on the other one. That 96-93 scorecard was outlandish. It was a 99-90 scorecard in my opinion. Eric Priest was on the show as well a little bit ago, and he made a statement. This was a career best performance by Eric Priest. He showed up and showed out in that performance. He was incredible. Absolutely phenomenal. And by that performance, he got moved up to number 13 in the WBA. So he's a guy that's now going to continue to work his way up. He's one of Golden Boy's top young prospects, and he is going to be a threat at the middleweight division for a couple years now. Another up-and-coming young guy, Joshua Edwards, a heavyweight that was an Olympian for the United States team just about a year ago now. He fought his second fight, round 1 KO. Absolutely dominant performance. He took Alexander Rhodes, and just pretty much eliminated him very, very quickly. 2 minutes and 8 seconds was the mark in which he knocked him out. That was a good performance. And I said this before on Friday. Listen, Joshua Edwards was not going to go into this performance in a situation that was going to be, okay, this is a great fight. It's going to be challenging. No, it was to go out there, work out some of your kinks, and get better as a boxer. He did just that, and he made a great statement. Let's head over now into the other fight that took place in Mexico. Manuel Gallegos versus Khalil Coe. This was a massive fight performance by Khalil Coe. He proved me wrong, and he showed out big time in this fight. Let me add this about Khalil Coe. Khalil Coe is an exciting prospect, especially when he fights the way he did on Friday night. The way that Khalil Coe performed in that fight was phenomenal. That version of Khalil Coe is a guy that I look at and say, okay, he could be a pro with the light heavyweight division in the future. Because he went out there in complete domination, resulting in the KO in the 6th round. Remember, he was the one that got KO'd in the first match. And that was a massive shockwave that got sent out. But Coe went out there on this fight, utilized his jab, utilized his power shots, got the KO. His footwork, his defense, everything was on par in that fight, and he did a great job. What's next for him? Continue to build yourself up. Obviously, you're still a little bit of a ways out from getting yourself in position to be, fighting for a title limit or anything along those lines. He's still got 2 or 3 more fights away from that. Keep building yourself up and get in a good position. Manuel Gallegos, not over yet for him either. Rebuild yourself up, though. Just a quick rundown of the other fights that happened on that card. Gabriel Gollaz, Valenzuela, beat Manuel Medina. He won by 98-94, 96-94, 96-94 in favor of Valenzuela. This was a fight that he's coming off of a very quick turnaround. Probably should have waited a little bit longer. I do not know why he went to the ring that quickly. He did just that, though, and he ended up getting the win, but it's scraping by. As for MJ versus Luis Costello, MJ had a good performance. KO in round 8, but let me make this very, very clear for those listening. MJ has no shot at beating Naoya Inoue. Okay, maybe not no shot. It's boxing. He has a 2% chance at beating Naoya Inoue. The fact that Eddie Hearn has people out there actually believing that this could be a competitive fight, and not only just a competitive fight, but a fight that in which MJ could possibly beat Inoue, just goes to show why Eddie Hearn's one of the best promoters in all of boxing. MJ's not beating Inoue. That fight should be made next, and it will be made next. But still, Inoue is going to do damage, to say the least, to MJ in that fight. Adrian Curmel versus Johan Rubio, super flyweight fight, 99-91, 99-91, 98-92, all in favor of Curmel. He did his thing. He looked good in that fight, but it still just makes you wonder this. How was that man a world champion before? He is a solid fighter, but in his fight against Sivanachi Noshinga, he really only got that win done on him because Sivanachi was weight drained and should not have been fighting at that weight class at that point in time. So that is what it is. But Curmel, good performance in that fight as well.